The first episode begins with a woman named Carmen Navarro desperately trying to open the zip tie, holding her wrists together on a rock. When she notices a loud noise in the woods nearby, she pauses and mutters, "Murder maker," after which she resumes working on the zip tie. When she finally frees up herself, a large black dog that had been watching her for a while starts chasing her, so she runs into the woods. The scene changes, and we see Maggie Chenoweth and her son Arlo in a nearby rural ranch. Maggie places a teacup on a buzzing insect on the window pane. Listening to the buzzing sound, she calls Arlo to come listen to it, saying that it is a tempest in a teacup. Arlo points out of the window, saying that a tempest is actually headed their way. Maggie gets a piece of paper and releases the bug outside while Arlo watches from his window. James, Maggie's husband, is worried because the barn animals have been acting strange lately, but he can't figure out what is spooking them. Things are not too great between the couple, so Maggie avoids answering his question regarding their relationship. Then she heads toward the stables, where the horses are not too happy to see her. From his window, Arlo notices a goat escape through the fence into the woods. While Maggie returns to the house, Arlo goes after the goat through the back door. Unbeknownst to him, the woman from the start is watching him from a distance, with blood on her hand. In the next scene, Maggie reconciliates with Ellen, James's mother, with whom she argued a while ago. When Ellen's finished cooking, Maggie sets the table and goes to call her kids Meryl and Arlo. When the latter does not show up, both Maggie and James assume that he is hiding, as per the norm. Shortly after, their neighbors, the Shanleys, show up in a horse trailer with their injured horse, Scout, who had been slamming its head against a fence. Since Maggie is a vet, she asks Ruben to help him bring Scout to her clinic, while Valeria and their son Nicholas stay back with the others to look for Arlo. Nicholas tells how he was out checking the fence lines with Scout when something suddenly spooked it, and then it wouldn't stop running its head against the fence. Suddenly they hear the strange noise, but James claims it's the weather. While Ellen and Nicholas discuss how much static they get on the radio nowadays, Meryl figures out one of the goats is missing, so Arlo must have gone after it into the woods. On the other hand, Arlo runs into Carmen, who is muttering something and comes toward him. Back at the clinic, Maggie is worried about the piece of wood lodged in Scout's neck, but when she pulls it out, there is no excessive bleeding, so she tells Ruben that Scout is going to be just fine. Meanwhile, James and Valeria talk in the woods, and we learn that they had an affair, and Maggie just knows about the affair, not the person James was involved with. James is not too worried about Arlo missing because his kids have a knack for hiding well in the craziest spots. Just then, Nicholas and Meryl join them, and they find the goat and another neighbor's missing dog. When they hear a nearby growling, James asks them all to get back to his house, thinking it is a coyote. In the next scene, Arlo is seen unconscious on the forest floor with scratches on his arm and mouth wide open. Carmen looms over him, and when she opens her mouth, Arlo wakes up, while the whites of their eyes flash with color. Back at the house, the neighbor named Donald Kelly and his wife Claire show up to pick up their dog that Meryl rescued. As they get talking, Donald tells James that it was not a coyote in the woods, but rather a big dog, probably rabid. Maggie returns and is upset that Arlo is still missing, so Donald brings out his gun from his truck. He asks James to point him where he saw the dog running, but James believes they do not require a gun. Just then, Ellen notices Arlo coming out of the woods with scratches resembling finger marks on his arms. He is muttering the same phrases Carmen was before, and when Maggie asks who did this to him, he faints in her arms. On the other hand, Carmen leans against a tree, being lucid now. Suddenly, she is attacked by the black dog. Meanwhile, somewhere else in the city, we see McNabb, a man wearing a gas mask, get out of his car and draw a blue line with spray paint on the road. In the next episode, as soon as Arlo arrives, the lights start flickering, the cars won't start, and the power goes out, leaving them with no way to get to the hospital. While Duke barks nonstop, Donald heads out into the woods with his gun, because he can't sit back and wait for the police while whoever hurt Arlo is still in the woods. While Ruben and James head to the stables, Maggie examines Arlo, and everyone is relieved when he wakes up. Valeria jokes about Meryl hiding in the oven in her childhood, which alarms Maggie that Valeria must be her husband's mistress, since no one outside the family knows about Meryl's hiding spot. When Maggie and Arlo are alone, she asks her son how he got those marks, but he doesn't remember anything. Suddenly, They hear the strange noise again, and Arlo blurts out that the only thing he remembers is that they need to leave as soon as possible. He tries to run away, and in doing so, he pushes Nicholas in the hallway, who falls and hurts himself. Maggie asks Meryl to tend to Nicholas's wound, and she pins down a fighting Arlo to keep him from running, while he keeps repeating those phrases. Maggie hears him say, "murder maker," after which Arlo passes out again. In the next scene, Valeria and Claire want to help around so they can take their minds off of what's happened to Arlo. Claire suggests heading back to her place with their dog so she can call 911 from their landline. Meanwhile, while Meryl cleans Nicholas's wound, he convinces her to admit that despite her apparent dislike for her mother, Meryl wants to be just like her. Then they share how the recent events have spooked them out. On the other hand, while James and Reuben line up the horses, they notice a car with its headlights on. Thinking of getting help, they run toward it, but McNabb gets out of the car and tells them to stop walking, holding a board in his hands. Then he points toward the blue line he painted on the road and tells them not to cross it. James pleads for help, but McNabb fires his gun in the air to keep them from crossing over. In the next scene, Arlo wakes up, but he is still under the influence. He lunges at Maggie with scissors, but she dodges. When he tries to leave the room, she blocks his way, even when he yells at her to go. When she pulls him closer, he slumps into her lap and tells her that it is not him doing these things. Maggie knows he doesn't mean her any harm and confesses she is scared too, just like him. Then she sings his favorite song to comfort him, while he puts some marbles on the floor and an inverted teacup on them. Back in the woods, Donald trips and drops his gun, only to find Carmen's dead body. When he turns around, he finds the big black dog staring at him. He backs away while keeping his eyes on the dog, but it starts chasing him, so Donald squeezes through the fence to get to James and Reuben near the road. The dog chases Donald and bites his arm, so Donald hurls it away toward the blue line. Just as the dog crosses the blue line, its bones push out from its body. The men watch in horror while McNabb writes on the board not to cross the line and not to trust anyone. With that, he leaves. Meanwhile, despite everyone's objection, Claire grabs Duke's leash and heads toward her home through the yard to call 911. When James, Donald, and Reuben realize she's headed for the line, they start running toward her, warning her to stay away from the line. She stops just in front of it, and when Donald tries to grab her, she pulls away and falls over the line. Just like the dog, Claire's bones snap and break out of her body. Donald tries to grab her, but he starts screaming as his skin starts peeling off his fingers, so Reuben and James pull him back while he laments over his wife's tragic death. Inside the house, Arlo points to the word trap in the dictionary and tells Maggie that the man inside his head is telling them to hide because it is coming and it will kill everything that gets in the way. The next morning, Donald is still outside, staring at his wife's mangled corpse. Maggie asks Meryl to look after Arlo and goes out to discuss what to do next with James. He plans to venture out, so Maggie suggests taking Reuben with him, but he declines. Maggie puts two and two together and confronts him about his affair with Valeria, which is why he does not want to take Reuben along. James admits it and tells Maggie that it's over, as he loves her and the kids. Unbeknownst to them, Reuben overhears the entire conversation. When Valeria wakes up, she realizes Reuben is upset, who later gives his rifle to Maggie for protection and announces that he will accompany James so they can get help. Both men ride horses through the woods to get to their nearest neighbors, the Navarros. Next, Maggie brings a grief-stricken Donald inside the house, while Ellen and Valeria grab a blanket and get close enough to the line, where they throw it on Claire's corpse. Donald remembers the other dead body in the woods, while Maggie treats his injured hand. In the next scene, Meryl and Nicholas notice Arlo rummaging through the dictionary learning words. Arlo claims he is a harbinger, while the real Arlo is resting, and they are all trapped. Meryl does not believe him, and she tackles Arlo, which results in a glass of water toppling over a drawing of the rainbow. Surprisingly, the colors spread out at one end, and the harbinger says they are not trapped. Just then, the real Arlo awakens and asks Meryl to trust the guy in his head. Moving on, Nicholas and Meryl follow Harbinger into the woods. When they come to a burnt clearing marked by dead animals, the Harbinger points toward the sky, implying this is where he came from. He collects some rainbow-colored liquid from the ground, claiming it is poison, and asks Meryl and Nicholas that they have to drink it, but only enough so they can walk across the line. If they drink more than that, they will die, and if they wait, the assassin will show up and kill them. In the next scene, Ellen tells Valerie she knows about her fling with James. Valerie is ashamed, but she hates the farmer life with Ruben. Just then, a car shows up, and a blonde man wearing a bulletproof vest crosses the line and enters. Meanwhile, Ruben and James split in search when they reach the Navarro's house. Noticing some dead members of the family, James happens upon the dead body of a little boy inside the house. Suddenly, he hears something in the basement, so he goes down the stairs where a hand pulls him in. On the other hand, Maggie finds the dead body Donald mentioned in the woods and recognizes her to be Carmen Navarro. In the next scene, the visitor introduces himself as Lieutenant Olson, claiming he is there to help them while looking for a certain Carmen Navarro, who was acting rather strangely, so if anyone's been in contact with her, he should know. Ellen mentions Arlo went into the woods, so Olson asks about Arlo. Maggie remembers that McNabb asked the men not to trust anyone, so she lies about Arlo being in the barn. Meanwhile, Meryl asks the Harbinger to talk to Arlo, who tells her that the Harbinger is on a secret mission he cannot disclose yet. On the other hand, Olson tells Maggie that he is part of a large police force, and the only way they will survive the strange vibration that kills humans and animals is if she lets him talk to her son. Maggie asks if he killed Carmen because she noticed the marks on her wrists, so she knows Olson is lying. This prompts Olson to attack her, but Maggie knocks him out with her gun. Olson wakes up tied in the barn while Valeria and Maggie keep watch over him. Later, Maggie leaves for the clinic to check on Donald, and Ellen is left in charge of Olson. He asks her to clean the blood from his eye, and when she gets close enough, he opens his mouth, which transfers the entity into Ellen. Under the entity's control, Ellen shoots Olson fatally and stages a struggle in the barn. Meanwhile, in the woods, Nicholas, Meryl, and the Harbinger come across McNabb holding a sign urging them not to cross the line. When he notices the jar, he asks the kids to hand it over to him. They refuse, so the masked guy and Nicholas get into a scuffle, which ends in McNabb getting stabbed by Nicholas, and the jar breaks. Meryl tries to stop the bleeding and takes off McNabb's mask. He suddenly realizes the Harbinger, who also recognizes the entity inside McNabb's body. McNabb tells him that he is trying to help him. Moving on, James finds himself tied in the basement by a man called Travis who intends to shoot James in the head. In the end, Ruben enters a shed and comes across a glowing tree with flickering rainbow lights. James tries to explain about Arlo being sick and the blue line, but Travis does not believe him. In a flashback, a young Travis overhears a drunk McNabb in a bar telling everyone about an invisible death trap and visitors from space. He shows a scar on his hand to prove it's real. Later, when Travis is driving him home, McNabb tells him that the death trap draws you into its glowing power source. McNabb realizes Travis believes him, and they start spending more time together. McNabb tells him that the visitors are either good or bad, and they come via meteors to the Earth. Since they don't have bodies, they inhabit humans. His daughter Alyssa had a good visitor inhabiting her, but a bad visitor came hunting the good one, and they crossed the line using the rainbow liquid, which killed Alyssa. Then he introduces Travis to Olson, who teaches him how to use a gun. While Travis wonders if James is a good visitor or bad, he remembers how McNabb and Olson recently warned him against a bad visitor inhabiting the body of Mary Alice Ducker, who is gathering guns and zip ties for the arrival of a good visitor. The three men followed Mary, who released a dog into the woods, and headed to the Navarro's house. There, they realized Carmen was the good visitor, but Mary started killing the Navarro family. She poured the rainbow liquid into the silo, which grew into the glowing tree and hypnotized McNabb. Seeing him distracted, Carmen escaped into the woods. McNabb realized Mary was setting a trap, so he drove away in panic, leaving Travis behind. Mary then shot Travis twice, and the visitor inside Mary inhabited his body, but since he was bleeding out, it inhabited Olson's body when he came up to check on Travis. Seizing the opportunity, Travis ran inside the house and had been hiding in the basement until James showed up. He tells James the entire story and decides to let him go. James asks him to accompany them, but Travis kills himself with his gun. Next, James finds Ruben trapped in the silo and breaks him free using an axe. However, since Ruben knows the truth about James and Valeria, he punches him in the face, and the men venture into the woods. where they run into the kids along with an injured McNabb. In the next scene, Maggie treats Ellen's head injury, oblivious about the visitor inside her. The visitor is about to transfer to Maggie, but Valeria enters the room just in time. Shortly after, James, Ruben, and the kids show up. Hearing everything, James deduces that the visitor is inside Ellen now. Nicholas tells his parents everything, and Ruben decides to go to McNabb's car. There, Nicholas finds a diary that belongs to McNabb. Meanwhile, Maggie and Merrill treat McNabb's wounds, and then Arlo tells Maggie that the Harbinger is the on switch for a machine he wants to find, without waking up more assassins. He also says that McNabb is a good visitor, but when he wakes up, he asks Maggie to hand over Arlo to him. When she doesn't, he shoots at Donald and runs away. Next, James and Donald look for Ellen and eventually find her in the stables. When everyone is back at the Chenoweth house, Ellen believes the visitor has transferred to someone else, which means it could be anyone among the 6 adults. Nicholas remembers reading in McNabb's diary that an assassin can be expelled, but the human host has to drown. Maggie writes down instructions on how to resuscitate a drowning victim, and the men build a fire, hoping the smoke will get them some attention and help from outside. On the other hand, McNabb gets to Navarro's house and finds Travis's body, so he takes the vial of colored fluid from his neck, one that he had given to Travis a while ago. Meanwhile, Donald and Ruben head to the Navarro estate, where Ruben tries to destroy the tree, but in vain. On the other hand, Nicholas learns about an underground resistance against the visitors and confides in Merrill, after which they share a kiss. Then, Merrill goes into Arlo's room and notices him drawing some lines, so she assumes it's a map. The siblings deduce the drawing leads to Belknap Mountain. Meanwhile, Valeria takes Nicholas away from the house to tell him who the assassin is. It turns out she is the one, and after transferring into Nicholas, the entity pushes the lucid Valeria over the line. The last episode starts with a woman digging the forest floor for a bag. Someone calls her, and she asks about McNabb's whereabouts. Meanwhile, McNabb instructs Ruben to drink the rainbow fluid from Travis's vial, which enables Ruben to cut a branch of the tree. He puts it in a jar instantly, and it transforms into rainbow liquid. On the other hand, James and Maggie wonder how they will resuscitate the drowning victim without mouth-to-mouth, as the gas masks are mandatory to keep the visitors from inhabiting their bodies. Upstairs, assassin Nicholas grabs Merrill's attention, who goes to help him, but when she gets close, the visitor transfers inside Merrill. Arlo watches everything from his window and warns his parents. When assassin Merrill knocks out Nicholas and walks into the house, Maggie holds her at gunpoint. With their gas masks on, Maggie and James try to drown Maggie in the bathtub. A struggle ensues and Merrill finally drowns. Maggie instantly pulls her out and manages to revive her. Suddenly, James asks them all to run as he struggles with himself. The group decides to cross the line after taking the rainbow liquid. Ellen decides to stay back for the livestock until they come back for her with a solution. Suddenly, a high-pitched sound alerts Arlo and the Harbinger, and he lures James into the barn. Following them, Maggie hits James with a tranquilizer, and Arlo reminds her about the teacup from the start, prompting her to trap James in a large freezer. In the next scene, everyone drinks the rainbow liquid and crosses the blue line, after which they get into Olsen's vehicle and leave for the fire station. Before they can get there, their way is blocked by Carol, the woman from the beginning of this episode who knows McNabb. Just then, an orange car shows up and knocks down both McNabb and Carol. A masked man named Hayden gets out of the car along with a woman, who empties Carol's bag to show zip ties, ketamine, and rainbow liquid. As it turns out, Carol is one of the visitors who are waking up everywhere in the world now. The woman asks the group to join them in their fight against the visitors, but Maggie asks her for a proper explanation, and this is where the episode ends. With that, the movie ends. Thanks for watching Teacup Season 1. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel. See you next time. Welcome, sci-fi fans. Futurist Flicks is thrilled to launch our exclusive membership program, designed for loyal fans like you. By joining, you'll unlock early access to recap videos, unseen recap videos, raffle prizes, free merch giveaways, exclusive content and behind-the-scenes insights, access to community events, live streams, and Q&A sessions. Join the Cosmic Crew today and get instant access to exclusive perks. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for more intergalactic adventures.